Reboot your credit card with Apple Card. It gives you unlimited daily cash back that can earn 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a savings account. A high-yield, low-effort way to grow your money with no fees. Apply for Apple Card now in the Wallet app on iPhone to start earning and growing your daily cash with savings today. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners, subject to eligibility. Savings accounts by Goldman Sachs Bank USA. Member FDIC. Terms apply.
You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Welcome to the podcast episode, or wait a minute, let me start over. Welcome back to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast, your premier podcast with the spotlight on section hikers. And I am your host, Julie Jester Gayheart. And what I was going to say is welcome to episode 159, where we are going to venture north about as far as we can go on the Appalachian Trail and talk about setting up your section hike in New Hampshire, and specifically going through the White Mountains of New Hampshire. This is probably the episode that a lot of you have been waiting on. I have received a lot of questions, and what I want to do for this episode, there is going to be no specific checklist because I have created some slides that you guys are going to see if you are over on the YouTube channel, Julie Gayheart. If not, this is the episode you need to come over and watch, because this is going to be a true, what I am going to call, workshop of how to navigate through the whites of New Hampshire and enjoy your section hike and not mess up like I did quite a few times trying to get myself through New Hampshire. And just want to recognize everyone that is in the chat. Thank you so much for joining for this episode. I see a few of you there, so big shout out and wave to each of you. Before we get to the very specifics of planning, organizing, and getting yourself to the White Mountains and successfully having a hike, I do want to recognize our partner for these Appalachian Trail section hiker, what I am calling now workshop episodes. Hiker Metals and the owner of Hiker Metals, you guys, Wim, has been a phenomenal partner, not only on these series, but over for Jester Wallace Productions. And I wanted to put the highlight today on the Smokies 900 miler medal. And you guys, Wim is coming on the podcast this coming Tuesday, May 23rd, over on the Jester Wallace Productions channel. And Wim is going to talk about all the intricacies that went into making the 900 miler medal. He's going to go over how Hiker Metals started and what it's been like to work with me in Austin. So hopefully you guys will join us this coming Tuesday, May 23rd at 8 p.m. over on the Jester Wallace Productions channel. And if you want to get a discount on the metals that you're going to order, go over to hikermetals.com, type in the code Jester in all cap letters, and you will receive a 20% discount on your order. Next up, I want to recognize Rolf. If you guys will remember, Rolf was in episode number 152, and he was getting ready to head out on his hike of the Benton MacKay Trail. Well, he has done that, and he has completed that successfully, and I'm hoping we can get him back on the show this fall. But he also just gave me a 5-star review over on Apple Podcast. So I wanted to show that to you guys. Thank you, Rolf. He says, Jester's section hiking podcast are chock full of useful information, especially on section hikes in the eastern U.S., including the Appalachian Trail. Jester has a warm, pleasing style. When interviewing guests and when sharing her own vast knowledge and experience, her passion for hiking and educating others is infectious. So thank you, Rolf, and I hope that all of you feel the same way as Rolf as well. And you guys, these 5-star reviews, the personal emails, the DMs over on Instagram, I cannot thank each one of you enough. And I also want to give a shout out to a couple episodes ago, I mentioned Candy Kemp. I read an email from her that she was going to send me something, and she did. She sent this because she likes the show, and she is very grateful for what we do here at the Hiking Radio Network. And I want to show this off. It is a phone stand. And Candy, you can rest assured, this phone stand will be by my side at each and every one of these episodes. She personalized it for me. It's got my trail name. It has the year that I completed the Appalachian Trail, class of 2017. And she also put the mileage for the year that I completed the trail, which was 2,190 miles. Candace, thank you so much for that. And I want to pop up on the screen. She also sent me her business cards. And if you are watching over on YouTube, you can go right now. You can screenshot. Her company is Turtle to Goat Creations. And I love it because it is veteran owned and operated. She's got her email on here. QR code. If you are watching the video version, go ahead and scan that and take a look at what she has over on Turtle to Goat Creations. I know she has a Facebook page as well. So Candace, from the bottom of my heart, I truly, truly appreciate it. And you will know that this is sitting on my desk at every podcast episode that I do, whether it is here for Jester Section Hiker or over on Jester Wallace Productions on our Beyond the Trail podcast. This will be sitting right here in front of me with my phone on it. So Candace went all out. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And one more thing before we get started on this episode, I have booked Mills Kelly. Mills Kelly was on episode number 107, and we talked about his podcast. We talked about the history of the Appalachian Trail. And I believe on that podcast, he mentioned that he was going to have a book coming out, and he did. This book, Virginia's Lost Appalachian Trail. One of these days, I will figure out how to hold something up in the camera. Virginia's Lost Appalachian Trail. Mills is going to be joining us Thursday evening, June 8th at 7 p.m. Let me go ahead and say that again. Thursday evening, June 8th at 7 p.m. Mills Kelly is going to be joining us. And I've got some homework to do. I've got this book to read to prep for that interview, but I'm excited for Mills to come back on the show. He and I are working on collaborating some more as podcasters and doing some things together, so that should be exciting. Maybe we'll talk about that in that episode as well. Again, mark your calendars, June 8th, coming up on a Thursday evening at 7 p.m., and if you are subscribed to the YouTube channel, you will get a notification when we are live. Let's go ahead and get to it. I mentioned earlier that there is not going to be a checklist for this episode because I spent some time in my preparation while I was looking over, again, the AT guide. And instead of doing a checklist, since I'm an educator, I decided to go ahead and create some specific slides for this particular trek through the White Mountains of New Hampshire, otherwise known on the AT as the Whites. And I'm just going to go ahead and say the Whites are probably the most logistical trek along the states on the Appalachian Trail where you truly, truly, truly have to plan how you're going to do this, especially as a section hiker. If you guys are following any thru hikers that are vlogging their hikes right now, they are going to be, when they get closer and closer, they are going to be talking about their strategy on how to get through the Whites. And we're going to go ahead and do that now for section hikers specifically. And I'm going to go ahead and say There is no way on this earth that I can plan specifically for what you guys want to do on your own journey through the whites on the Appalachian Trail. So what I did is I put together 3 different choices. So this episode is all about making choices and how you specifically want to go through the whites. So the AT guide pages for this particular section, if you want to follow along, are pages 200 through 214. So the AT guide pages are pages 200 through 214 in this year's version of the AT guide 2023. So as a section hiker, you always have choices. And another thing I want to mention is this has happened to me, I'm going to say 100% of the time. So sitting at the house, looking at the AT guide, looking at all the things. Oh, I'm going to do this. Oh, I'm going to plan to go 8 miles a day, 12 miles a day, 15 miles a day. Inevitably, things change once you are on the trail. You are hiking, hearing information off the trail, what your body is able to do as you are adapting to the mileage. So keep that in mind to be open and be resilient when it comes to especially planning your section hike in the whites of New Hampshire. You've got 3 choices. You can, in my mind, you could backpack the entire trek. You could do a hut-to-hut. So in the whites, the AMC Mountain Club, they have huts all along the way in the White Mountains. You can do an entire hut-to-hut trek. Another variation that I did is I backpacked and I stayed in the huts. And the variation allowed me, number one, to carry a actually I carried my day pack all through the whites. So it allowed me to have a day pack, go with lighter weight, knowing that I was going to stay in the huts. And the way that I did this, once I got through, when you're leaving Vermont and you are heading into the state of New Hampshire, you're going to be flat. You're going to go through the town of Dartmouth. And once you get through the college, you are going to be entering some fairly mild terrain, but you are going to start seeing the rocks, the roots, and the terrain change all the way up through Mount Moosilauke. And when you get to Mount Moosilauke, that is really where I consider that you are entering the White Mountains. So if you're looking at the AT guide, look at the point on the Vermont-New Hampshire border. You're going to go through the town of Dartmouth, New Hampshire, and you're going to have a day or two before you hit Mount Moosilauke. So Mount Moosilauke is the first time in the White Mountains that you are going to be going above what is called going above tree line. Out west, they call it going up and over passes. On the East Coast, they call it going above tree line. And what that means is you're going to hit a point on the mountain where there are no more trees. You are higher than the actual trees that you have climbed up to get to that part. In the White Mountains, they actually call it the Alpine Zone. So you're going to hit several mountains where you're going to go up and over the Alpine Zone, the tree line, and then back down into the trees. So for this slide, you've got decisions. Backpacking, are you going to go hut to hut? Or are you going to do a variation where you're going to backpack with a very light pack because the mileage you need to take into consideration because of the terrain, and kind of spend one night out, go to a hut, spend one night out, go to a hut, that kind of thing. Something for you to think about as you are going through the AT guide. The next slide, I want to very specifically talk about backpacking. If you have it in your mind that you are going to backpack through the whites, you need to take into consideration these 5 things. So you're going to carry your backpack all the way from the border of New Hampshire and Vermont, all the way to Gorham, New Hampshire. So you need to take in consideration, especially if you are starting on the border of New Hampshire and Vermont and you want to do the whole state, your mileage. Because if you're like me and you're section hiking, you don't have trail legs. And New Hampshire is the state that I would recommend that you do all the training and everything you can to prep and get ready, and you're still not going to be ready. So your mileage is a huge consideration. And one of the things I want you to keep in mind with your mileage, going 8 to 10 miles a day seems low mileage. But as you are entering the whites, especially once you get up and down Mount Moosilauke, an 8 to 10 mile day, if you are backpacking, that is going to take you all day. It is going to take you from the time you get up till the time you're about ready to pass out and put your tent up that night, because the terrain is steep, it's rocky, it's rooty. You're going to be hand over hand in some parts in the whites. And what you want to consider is the weight that is in your pack as you are hiking. And I heard, I believe, it was the Wonder Women. If you guys watch the Wonder Women, they described the whites as a rock trough. And I thought that is the best explanation of the whites. It is a rock trough. There is, in some points, from Moosilauke until you get to Gorham, there's no trail. It's rocks, it's rock slabs, you're sliding down, you're climbing up on, and it's all doable, but you want to set yourself up for success. So consider that in your mileage, in what you're doing. Consider as you're looking through the AT guide, or if you are looking on Far Out, the spacing between the shelters or the campsites. Consider your resupply. Again, you want to try to keep your pack as light as possible. I would plan to do no more than 8 to 10 miles a day. And I'm being serious about that. If you want to have a good time and you want to get through the whites successfully, because you'll hear the thru hikers. They get to the whites, they've got their trail legs, they've got 1,700 miles on their legs, and you will hear them say that a 15-mile day took them all day. And they've got trail legs. So keep that in mind. Your mileage is going to depend on where the shelters are, where the towns are, the resupply. The towns are set up pretty nice. So as you're going through the guide, make sure you take a look at that. Make sure you take a look at your hostels. And again, reach out to the hostels, reach out and ask, hey, do you guys have Slackpack options? Do you guys have options for me to leave my car, to get dropped off? To only do a couple days and hike to my car. Always call the hostels. So when you're backpacking, all of these things, take that into consideration, the mileage, where the shelters are, or the AMC campsites. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later, which costs money. The resupply options in the towns, utilizing the hostels, and then just making sure that you've set yourself up for success. So your first choice is, am I going to backpack the state of New Hampshire and go through the whites? And typically, if you're backpacking, again, you also have the option to stay in the huts. And I do recommend staying in the huts. Some people, they got an issue with the huts. Jester has no issue with the huts because the hut system helped me get through the whites safe and sound, but you can do that without utilizing the huts. So the next thing I want to go over is I'm going to call a hut-to-hut hike. And some people, and I've met people at the huts that are doing this, and the next time, because I need to go through New Hampshire again, I am going to actually hike from the border and probably Slackpack and utilize the hostels from the border of New Hampshire to the Kinsmans, which the Kinsmans are just past Mount Moosilauke. From the border of New Hampshire up and over Mount Moosilauke, and before you head up to the Kinsmans, I am going to either Slackpack or day hike, whatever you want to call it. And then starting from the Kinsmans, I am going to utilize the hut system. And the hut system is broken down in the AT guide. There are several huts that you could utilize, but I am going to say right off the bat, the huts cost money. And I believe they are anywhere, I think they're either $89, $99, or $100 a night. And some people are going to bulk at that price. And that's okay because it's your hike and it's hike your own hike. But I am going to utilize the hut system because they are evenly spaced out and it just makes it a nicer trip. And pretty much you can utilize your day pack because everything I need for backpacking an overnight without food, because food is so heavy, will actually fit in my day pack. So it makes it nicer. I'm still carrying either a tent or a hammock or something in case something happens. That's the other thing you got to be careful of in the whites. You want to be able to spend the night out on the trail. So keep that in mind. If you are going to utilize the huts, you can go hut to hut, which again, if you're looking at the slide over here on YouTube, again, the mileage, you got to consider your mileage. You got to consider your huts. You got to consider the spacing of the huts based on, okay, I'm in a town. I'm going to go up to a hut. I'm going to go down to another town. That is going to make you have more mileage. So I want to be clear on that as well. If you are going hut to hut, the huts are pretty evenly spaced out, 7, 8, 9, 10 miles apart. If you are doing a variation, you may have to do more miles to stay to a hut overnight and then do more miles to get back down to a town. An example of that is going up and over Franconia Ridge. So you've done Moosilauke, you've gone up and over the Kinsmans, and now you are down in a town near Lincoln, New Hampshire, and you're going to head back on the AT again, and you're going to go up and over Franconia Ridge, which to me is the best ridge on the East Coast. Franconia Ridge is amazing, and you want to make sure you have a good weather window for that. You're going to go up and over Franconia and spend the night at Gayheart Hut, and then the next day, you're going to go up and over Mount Gayheart, and you're going to come down, and you're going to be in Crawford Notch. So that is just one example of utilizing the hut system, but also utilizing the towns. Maybe you're going to stay at a hostel. And I added a vehicle to this particular section because maybe you're going to have your vehicle and you're going to do a total combination. So your vehicle is going to be down at Crawford Notch. You're going to get a shuttle back to where you're going to start the Franconia Ridge climb. You're going to go up Franconia Ridge. You're going to spend some time on the amazing, the ridge is 2 or 3 miles until you head down into Gayheart Hut. And it just hit me. I just remembered. You want to take your time coming down from Franconia Ridge because the downhill to the Gayheart Hut, y'all, it about killed me. I don't know what it is about that downhill, and I've been on it twice. It is a waterfall, and it is like climbing down a waterfall. That's the only way I can explain it. And no matter what time of year, no matter anybody that I've talked to, they have always said there is water going down that climb down to the Gayheart Hut. So that is where you want to take your time. That is where you want to make sure your pack weight is not too much. That is where you want to make sure that, you have spaced your timing right with the weather and all the variations of things that can happen in the White Mountains. And you want to make sure that you're prepared because the weather up on top of the White Mountains can change in an instant. It could be 85 degrees when you're starting down in Lincoln, New Hampshire. And when you get up on Franconia Ridge, it could be 60 in the middle of summer or even cooler. So keep that in mind as well. So we've gone over a couple things, whether you want to backpack, whether you want to utilize the hut system, hut to hut to hut to hut, which is very doable. But I do want to make sure that you know and understand there is a cost to that. And I have never had a problem with the Appalachian Mountain Club huts. I love staying in them. They help me be successful on my hike, and they help me successfully get through the White Mountains without having to carry a heavy pack, very, very specifically as a section hiker. The one thing I do want to say, and we're going to talk about here shortly, is you want to know exactly when you are going to be going to the White Mountains because you do have to make reservations at the huts. When I made that statement at the very beginning of this episode that there is no possible way, that there's no one way to go through the White Mountains, but there are ways to get through very successfully depending on what type of hiker you are. And that is what I'm going over today more specifically. And I do want to throw out there that if any of you that are watching this on YouTube or listening to the audio version of the show on your favorite podcast app, if any of you reach out to me and you want help specifically on how you are going to go through the White Mountains, please reach out to me because I will be more than glad to help you to look at an itinerary and make sure you're good to go through the White Mountains. And I'll even throw another thing out there. If you want to come on the podcast, I would love for somebody to come on the podcast and we plan your hike together for an episode. I think that would be a lot of fun. And as we flip over to the next screen, this screen is what I've titled What You Need to Know. And we're going to go over more specifically about the AMC huts and the AMC campsites. So the huts is an experience. And under the huts, I have the guest experience, what a work for stay is, and how you find out all this information. So outdoors.org will get you to the website that you need to go to. It depends on if you are going through the huts or going to do a hut-to-hut experience, whether you're going to stay in the huts, whether you're through hiking, and most of the people listening to this podcast are section hikers, because through hikers could do what is called a work for stay. So let's go over the guest experience. So you've booked your huts, you're going to do a hut-to-hut experience, or maybe you're going to backpack and you're maybe going to stay one night in a hut. And if you do that, the one hut that I recommend that you stay in is the Lake of the Clouds, which is the hut 1 mile before you summit Mount Washington. What an experience at the Lake of the Clouds hut. Anyway, that if you are backpacking, that is one hut that I recommend that you try to stay in. They're all wonderful, but if you're going to have one experience, stay in the Lake of the Clouds hut. And the guest experience is you hike in that day, you get dinner that evening. There are typically young college kids working at the huts. They put on an experience after dinner. They have a little fun. They do some skits. And then the next morning, you will get breakfast. And they kind of do the same thing. So when you arrive to the hut, you will have a bunk. You will check in. Typically, you'll get ready for dinner. You're able to change your clothes. The huts have primitive bathrooms. They're kind of like indoor privies. And obviously, the people that work at the huts take care of that. There are no showers or anything like that. These are just buildings with bunks and people work in them. They have a kitchen. You'll get an evening meal. You will get a breakfast. And you could do a little bit of resupply, maybe some snacks. You cannot do a full resupply at the huts, so do not count on that. If you are backpacking and you go buy a hut, sometimes if they have leftover food, you can go into the hut. You could fill up on your water. Maybe you could pay some money to get some soup, get some snacks, and just kind of hang out at the hut and then head on your way. So when the huts are open, so you have to look. You can look in the AT guide. They have the dates of when the huts are open. So when the huts are open, you can fill up your water, whether you're staying there or not. You can go inside the huts. You can sign the trail register. So utilize what they have out there for you. And one of the things that I would do, and I did, is I signed the trail register just because I wanted to document not only my hike, but for safety reasons as you are going through the White Mountains. So even if you decide you're not staying at the huts, stop in, see a couple, fill your water, have a lunch, hang out, talk to the people that are working at the huts, because one of the things that they do at the huts is they provide up-to-date weather and what is going on in the White Mountains. And if you are hiking through as a backpacker, you can stop in, you can get updates on the weather, you can find out if a storm is coming in and maybe what you need to do in that situation. If you are through hiking, there is something called a work for stay, where through hikers can come through. And in the past, I'm not sure what the deal is for the 2023 hiker season, but through hikers can come and you can't get to the huts until after 4 o'clock. And each hut will have so many spaces where you could do a work for stay. And what that means is you can stay for free at the hut, but maybe they have you doing the dishes after dinner. Maybe they have you cleaning up, mopping, whatever, cleaning the restrooms, which are primitive restrooms. Keep that in mind. They are not flush toilets. They are like privies in the huts. And I have also seen at the huts, and I thought this was pretty cool, sometimes they will have AT through hikers give a talk that evening to the guests that are staying at the hut and talk about their experience and, things that they've encountered along the way on their Appalachian Trail through hike. So I love going to the huts. They're always an experience. And as a section hiker, I don't mind paying because I'm getting the experience. And I look at it like this. I'm on vacation. So I'm not going on a cruise. I'm not, whatever people do on vacation. My vacation is always hiking. So I am utilizing that money so I can have a good experience. And you want to make sure, if you want to, you can tip they call themselves the crew, CROO at the huts. You can tip them if you want to. It is not necessary. But you can get the full hut experience. And again, you guys, I do recommend that you do that. At least stay at one hut. Give it a try. So the Appalachian Mountain Club has the hut system. And the one thing we need to talk about that we haven't touched on yet are, as you are going through the whites, we've talked about the huts, but they also have campsites that are maintained and managed by the Appalachian Mountain Club. They will have a caretaker there, and the campsites do cost money. So as you are looking at the AT guide, again, pages 200 through 214 for the New Hampshire section, and say you see a shelter and then 8 miles later or 10 miles later, you don't see a shelter, but you see a campsite. That campsite, I believe they are $10 a night. But again, you can go to outdoors.org and there is a system for staying at the campsites. But here's the thing about the campsites. Typically, they have platforms, tent platforms. So keep that in mind based on what kind of tent you have. So if you have a freestanding tent, no problem. You'll be able to set that thing up in addition to the campsites. Apparently, the Appalachian Mountain Club, they have an AT through hiker pass now where you could pay a particular fee and you can stay at those campsites for cheaper as you go. And that is something that I would think about and look at and utilize if I am trying to go through the entire state utilizing campsites. And if I remember correctly, the AMC Mountain Club considers a through hiker somebody, this is kind of like the Smokies. Back in the Smokies, you had to hike 50 miles before you enter the park. The Appalachian Mountain Club considers you a through hiker if you hike 100 miles prior to hitting the White Mountains. I didn't read anything about hiking 100 miles afterwards, but again, you guys, there is so much information. If I tried to pile everything into one episode, I think it would take me 3 or 4 hours to go over all of the information because it would be based on your particular experience that you want to have as you are going through the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Another thing I want to mention is the AMC also has hiker shuttles, but they come at various times through various trailheads and take you to various places. So you want to make sure if you're going to plan on utilizing the hiker shuttle that you look and see when they are running through that particular town and what time you are basically going to be coming off the trail. Now, this sounds like a lot of information, and I cannot emphasize this enough. For this particular episode of your trek, your individual hike, section hike through the White Mountains of New Hampshire, it is very, very, very individualized depending on what you want to do. Do you want to backpack? Do you want to go hut to hut to hut? Do you want to do a variation of backpacking and going to the huts? And I will say this again, I will offer anybody that wants to email me, Jester@jestersectionhiker.com. I will be more than glad to go over your individual itinerary, look at what you want to do, and I'll throw it out here again. If anybody wants to come on the show and do an episode where we plan your hike through the White Mountains or any hike on the Appalachian Trail, I would love to do that. So keep that in mind. The last thing I wanted to go over is I want to hit on the terrain and the awesome peaks that you are going to encounter on your trek through the White Mountains. And the mountain that means the most to me, but it also represents something to me that I overcame and accomplished. Mount Moosilauke is where in 2014 I fell and dislocated my shoulder. And that changed my trek and my path forward on the Appalachian Trail. So Mount Moosilauke is your first true above alpine or above tree line mountain that you are going to enter in the White Mountains. The next range of mountains, and there are several in between these, but I am hitting the highlights. And I want to note that I used to call it Moosilauke until I spent some time in town with individuals that actually live in New Hampshire, and they pronounce it as Mount Moosilauke. So that's why I am calling it Mount Moosilauke. And you guys, the Kinsmans, they about killed me. You got South Kinsman and North Kinsman. And the climbs on these, you guys, the rocks, the roots, the thing about the whites is you're doing a lot of, somebody told me, oh, you can hike the whole AT with your legs. But when you get to New Hampshire, you got to use all four. So your arms and your upper body and everything counts when you get to New Hampshire. So the first range, Mount Moosilauke, the next fun range you're going to encounter are the Kinsmans. When you come down off the Kinsmans, the amazing, awesome, make sure you have a weather window, rearrange your trek, and be open to do so to go up and over Franconia Ridge on a bright, sunny day. Because you guys, when you get up to Franconia Ridge, it is something to behold. That's all I'm going to say. It is something to behold. When I got up to Franconia Ridge, there's this like rock scramble before you actually pop out and you're on tree line. It's almost unreal, and you almost kind of get disoriented a little bit when you get up on that ridge. It is so incredible. Yeah. So after Franconia, get water, eat snacks, or eat a lunch, because that is when you're going to be coming down Gayheart and either going to Gayheart Hut or staying at a campsite near there. And the climb out of Gayheart Hut up to Mount Gayheart, that's another one. That's a straight up, almost mile climb of rocks. Prepare yourself mentally for that. The next one is Webster Cliffs. Webster's Cliffs, that would about kill me too. Beautiful, amazing, and it is exactly what it says, cliffs. So you're climbing these cliffs to get up to the peak, which is called Webster Cliffs. A lot of people don't say this out loud. Don't repeat this. Stealth camp up on Webster Cliffs. You didn't hear it from Jester. So Webster Cliffs, and after Webster, one of my favorites is Mount Jackson. And my girlfriend and I, we were singing I'm Going to Jackson by Johnny Cash. I'm not sure that's the name of the song, but had a great time up on Mount Jackson. making our way toward Mount Washington, another sight to behold. There's so much going on when you get to Mount Washington. If you're going north, you'll probably stay in the Lake of the Clouds hut. And then from Lake of the Clouds, if you guys stay at that hut, that is the first time that I actually saw clouds swooping in and out of mountains. That's the only way I could even describe it. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And when we got to the Lake of the Clouds hut for the very first time I stayed there, it was socked in. You couldn't see a thing. You could barely see your hand in front of you. And later that evening after dinner, the skies opened up and everybody started running towards the windows in the hut and the clouds lifted. And all of a sudden you could see Mount Washington. It'll take your breath away. When you get up to Mount Washington, be sure to take your time. You can get up there. They've got a store. They've got hot soup. You can get sandwiches. You could do a little bit of a resupply there. And at Mount Washington, that is where you will also see people coming off of the cog train. And it is a thru hiker tradition. I'm not sure it's a section hiker tradition or not. If you see the cog train and you're hiking down on the AT, you're supposed to moon the train. So I have not done that. I have heard of people doing that and people talking about it. So just another hiker tradition on the AT. Up to you whether you do that or not. Jester did not moon the cog train, but also be prepared. When you get up to Mount Washington, if you've been hiking several days in the White Mountains, it's going to be a shock because you're going to go from seeing people you see on trail to a mini Disney when you get up to Mount Washington, because you can drive there and you can take the cog train there. People like to come there and hang out and get their picture taken on Mount Washington. And driving the Mount Washington Road, that's a whole other experience. Keep that in mind if you have your car. Parking it up on Mount Washington or getting off of Mount Washington is another consideration to think about. There's two more mountains I want to talk about that nearly killed me. The next one after Mount Washington that everybody talks about, going north on the AT. If you are hiking from Mount Washington to Mount Madison Hut, it is right at 7 miles, and it is some of the most beautiful, absolutely stunning 7 miles on, I'm just going to say, on the East Coast, Appalachian Trail, whatever you want to call it. It is 7 miles above tree line in the Alpine Zone. So you also, hopefully you'll hit between Mount Washington and Mount Madison or the Madison Hut on a very clear day, or maybe when the clouds are swooping in. And I'm actually really, really, really looking forward to doing that section again. It's very rocky, so prepare your feet, but very beautiful. It's not that bad elevation-wise going from Washington to Madison or Madison to Washington, but it's the rocks in your feet. And when you get to Madison, most of you, if you're going hut to hut, if not, you're going to at least stop in the hut. And then you've got your climb to Mount Madison, which it killed me, but they all kill me, but they're fun and you do it. And then you have your downhill from Mount Madison to Pinkham Notch. And that right there. So I did not do the downhill. I actually went south and went from Pinkham Notch up to Madison and then down to Madison Hut. So because my girlfriend that I was hiking with at the time, she said, we got to go uphill. This downhill will kill you. So we went uphill, and a lot of people are going to go, oh my God, Jester. So the uphill was much, much better to me than going downhill, because as we were going up, we were like, oh my God, we don't know how people go down these huge step downs. And if you watch anybody's vlog, they talk about going from Madison north down to Pinkham Notch. That is an incredible downhill. So do your research on that. Once you get down to Pinkham Notch, there is a hut there. There's a lodge. Joe Dodge Lodge, I believe is the name of it. And the climb out of Pinkham Notch. So you've got a 6 mile trail terrain on the AT from Pinkham Notch to Carter Notch Hut. And within that 6-mile range, you've got the Wildcats. So going up the Wildcats is where one spot where I thought, I'm not going to make it. I might turn around. Just unbelievable climbing like I've never climbed before, hand over hand, having to navigate, following the white blazes. There is a notch that you come to, and a lot of people take pictures of it. And the only way I could describe it is it's a notch in the side of the mountain, and it might be 10 to 15, 20 feet, maybe a little bit more than that. You have to shimmy yourself up through this notch. And so my girlfriend and I, Janet, she was like, okay, I'll go first. And I was like, Janet, I don't know if I could do this. I mean, I pretty much almost had a full-blown panic attack. She was like, nope, what we're going to do is we're just going to shimmy our packs up. We're going to shimmy our way up through here. So Janet makes her way through there, and I'm watching where she's putting her feet. And I'm like, okay, I can do it. I can do it. And we had some thru hikers actually come behind us. And of course, they went boop, 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 boop up, and it was no big deal. So then it was my turn to go up. And you guys, about halfway up through this chute, I froze. I didn't know if I was going to slide down. I didn't know how I was going to get up. And this is the honest truth. The only thing that got me up that chute was Jesus. That's all I'm saying. And somehow, I don't even know how. I don't know if I had an out-of-body experience. I don't know what happened, but somehow I shimmied my way up through there, and we celebrated. We celebrated for quite a while and then continued on. So that is my memory of the Wildcats. And we did stay at Carter Notch Hut and then worked our way out the next day. I believe the next day we stayed at Imp Campsite, had a great night at Imp Campsite, and then worked our way out to Gorham the next day. So a lot of fun, a lot of awesome memories. And I'm looking forward to hearing y'all's memories as you plan, as you make your way to New Hampshire on the AT, as you are working on your section hikes. As I close out this episode, it's just not even possible for me to explain how each of you as individuals are going to get through the whites. But what I'm willing to do is help you, give you information, and I'll throw out there one more time. If you are willing to come on the show and let's plan your hike live here on YouTube and have it be an episode, I would love to do that. And we are inching towards a couple more episodes. The next time I record, we are going to be going over the ins and outs of section hiking the 100-mile wilderness. And after that, I am going to add an episode called, I guess I'm going to call it Making Your Way Through Baxter State Park and summiting Katahdin. So be on the lookout for that. Reach out to me if you have any questions. I truly appreciate those that were here in the chat on the live. For those of you listening to the audio version of the show, consider coming over to YouTube, hanging out with us as we go live, subscribing to the channel. Thanks for listening, everybody. I messed up the intro, and I guess I'm going to mess up the outro on this as well. Thanks for listening, everybody. Be safe out there, especially in the White Mountains, and happy section hiking.
Wells Fargo presents one of the surest ways to grow your money. A Wells Fargo CD account, where you can earn a 5.00% annual percentage yield on an 11-month term with a minimum opening deposit of $5,000. Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/CD rates to open a CD account and start growing your savings with us.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.